Hi there, in this video we're going to look at the Django-Taggit library, which is an external app that you can add to your Django project, and it allows you to make tagging your models very easy and very intuitive. We're going to see how to use that in the next two videos, and we're eventually going to build this simple application here where we have a list of films and we can filter those films by the tags. For example, the 𝗵𝗽 tag will load up only the 𝗵𝗽 movies, and the sci-fi tag will only load up the sci-fi movies. Now this is controlled by 𝗬𝗚PHE, so we'll see how to integrate that with Django-Taggit in the next video. But for this video we're simply going to focus on what Django-Taggit provides, and you can grab code for the video from this GitHub repository here, and the starter code is where we're going to start from in this video. So make sure you clone that repository and get the starter code, and then you can get up and running. We're going to start by creating a model to use in this application for the films. So let's go to VS Code and get started now. So to start with, make sure you've installed the requirements in the requirements.txt file. And once you've done that, we're going to create a film model. So it's going to be called film, and it'll inherit from models.model. And we're going to add two fields to this model. One of them is going to be for the name of the movie, and the second one is the director. And we'll also add a dunder string method that will return the film's name. And that's it. It's a very simple model. We can then make the migrations with Python manage.py make migrations. That will add this model to our database, and finally we can migrate these changes. Now once we've done that, we're going to have a film table in our database. What we're now going to do is register this model film with our admin. Now the Django admin allows you to add new models and delete and change existing models very easily. So what we need to do is go to the admin.py file, and we'll add admin.site.register, and we're going to pass the film model to that. So we need to import that from our core apps models. We'll import that new model that we've just created, and when we register it we should then be able to see this in the admin. Now we're going to create a super user so that we can actually access the admin, and the command for doing that is python manage.py create super user, and when we execute that we'll add a user called bugbytes, and we'll leave the email address blank, and then we can fill out a password, and that will create this new user within our database. When we run the server and go to the admin interface, we should now be able to log into the admin. So let's go back to the app, and it's at the /admin endpoint here. This will bring a login page, and we can then log in using our bugbytes user as well as the password that we've set up. And then we see the admin interface, and we've got this core films model now available. So if we click this, we can actually add a new film to the database. Now before we add any films, what I'm going to do is add Django-Taggit to this project. Now the documentation has a getting started page, and it tells you can install Django-Taggit through pip, so we can use the pip install Django-Taggit command. So let's copy that into our terminal here and execute that command. I've already got it installed, so that should be all good for me. And if we go back to the documentation, we now get instructed to add Taggit to the installed apps settings. So let's go to settings.py, and here we are here, and it's in the installed apps list. We're going to add Taggit here, so within a string Taggit, and we'll save that. And the final thing we need to do is we need to add something to our model that tells the model that it has these tags, and it's using something called the taggable manager. So if we go to models.py, we're going to import the taggable manager from Django-Taggit, and once we have that taggable manager, we can then add a tags manager to our model, and we'll set it equal to that taggable manager, and that's going to add this new manager called tags, and that is going to allow us to extract the tags for this given model. And you can use this with any model in Django that you want to use tags with. Going to see what this does in a second, so let's save the models.py file. Now to make this tagging possible, Django-Taggit actually adds some tables to your database. So what we're going to do now is we're going to migrate, and that will then add these new tables, as you can see from Django-Taggit, some migrations from that particular app. And the final thing I want to do is I want to make the tags case insensitive. So if we go back to the getting started page at the bottom here, it says if you want Django-Taggit to be case insensitive, you add this particular setting to your settings.py and set it to true. Now by default, Taggit case insensitive is false, so we're going to add it to our settings.py file at the bottom, and we're going to set that equal to true. So that means the tags are case insensitive. So now that we've done that, let's go back to our admin. Let's run the server first, and we can go back to the Django admin now, and we're going to see what changes this has to our add film page. You now see we have a tags field here, and you can add a comma separated list of tags. Now I'm going to add 6 movies to this database, and we'll get back to the video once that's done. Okay, so now I've added 6 films to the database, and you can see these in the Django admin list page: The Thing, Alien, Big Lebowski, Godfather, Goodfellas, and Blade Runner. Now what I want to do is show the database structure, and we can then see what Django-Taggit has actually added. So let's go back to VS Code, and we're going to open up the Database Explorer. And if we look at the tables that we've got within this database, we should now see that we have a tag table, so we can see what data is in that. And we have the name of a tag as well as the slug. So these are all the tags that I've added to the database, and that's done through the admin interface. But the important table to connect your model to your tag is this particular table here. Now you have an object ID, a content type ID, and a tag ID. And these are basically linking up your Django model, which is the content type, with your tag ID. Now obviously in the tag table that we just looked at, each tag has the ID here. So for example, sci-fi is tag ID 1. When we look at the join table here, the content type is 7 and the tag ID is 1. So this is a sci-fi film because it has tag ID 1. Now what's the content type? This is related to Django's content types framework. And there's another table that it creates called content type. This is Django, not Django-Taggit. So if we show that table, we see that with ID 7 we have the core film model, and the content types framework is basically a way of working with generic foreign keys, and it can link them up through these IDs here. And this is the film model, so when we see this structure in the table, the content type ID, it's a film model and it has the tag ID of 1. And importantly, the object ID is the primary key of the actual film instance. We know the content type is a film, and the primary key of the film instance is 1 in this case. So if we go to the film table, then we can see the ID of 1 is Blade Runner. So that's what this Taggit table is doing here. It links an ID of a particular content type with a tag, and that's a many-to-many relationship. So that's a slightly technical explanation of what's going on under the hood, but you don't need to worry about this if you're just working with Django-Taggit. We can see now how we work with that in our ORM queries. So let's close off SQLite, and we're now going to cross over to the Django shell. So if we stop the server, and we can run the shell plus command from Django extensions. So I'm going to get the first film in the database. So it's going to be film.objects.first, and that gives us back the film Blade Runner. That's what that first film in the database is. Now if we look at the film, it has a new manager called tags. This is a taggable manager object, and that corresponds to what we've added on line 10 here, the taggable manager. Now this is like a many-to-many field, so we can query it with film.tags.all, and that will give us all of the tags associated with Blade Runner in this case. And we can see sci-fi, cyberpunk, and 80s are the tags. And we can also do other queries such as getting the first tag, and that will give us back sci-fi. Now this is an object of type tag, and it has an attribute of name. This is the name of the tag, and it also has a slug attribute as well, which gives us back the slug. And if you're wondering what these are, these come from the tags table. So if we go back to the database, the Taggit tag table, which contains the list of all the tags, that has a name column as well as a slug column. So the associated model has these particular attributes. Now there are a couple of convenience methods that you can use as well. So for example, if we go to the documentation, there is a convenience method called .names that exists on the taggable manager, and that returns all the names of the tags, specifically the name fields. So if we execute film.tags.names, that will give us back a query set containing just the names of those films. And we index in there at 0, we get sci-fi. Now because this is a many-to-many manager, essentially, we can also add items to this particular relation. So film.tags.add, we could add another tag to Blade Runner, and I'm just going to give this some random text, and then that will create this new tag instance in the database. So if we then run film.tags.all, we now see we have 4 tags instead of 3 with this new tag at the end. So that's how you can add another entry into that relationship. And we can also remove that tag again with film.tags.remove, and we pass the name of the tag here, and that will then remove it from that many-to-many query set. And when we now execute film.tags.all, we see we're back to the original 3 tags that we had. So we can programmatically add and remove tags as we need to. And we can also do filtering. So for example, film.objects.filter, and if we wanted to get all crime movies, we would look at the tags and we'd specifically look at the names, and we would filter by all names that are equal to crime, and that gives us back a query set with Goodfellas and The Godfather. And we can use other query set methods such as exclude here to get all the films except those crime films. from our database. So this is very versatile. It integrates seamlessly with Django's ORM, and we can look at tag names to filter down the query sets. So what I want to do now is show another feature that's coming from the documentation. So when you want to use tags in the admin, specifically in the list page of the admin, which is here, if you want to include tags in that, you're going to have to write a method that returns these tags. So the list display attribute of your model admin class, you will add a method there, and in this case it's called tag list, which equals this here, this function that's executed. And in the body of that function, it is getting all of the tags from this particular model object, and it's then joining them with a comma. So we're going to quickly show how to do that now. Go back to VS Code and back to the admin.py file. Now I'm going to replace this line with an admin class, and it's going to be called filmadmin, and it's going to take the name and the director as the list field. So if we go back to the admin interface here, we should then see that this changes now. This list page will then show the director as well. I think we need to run the server first. So let's exit out of the shell and we can run the server and go back to that list page here. So refreshing, we now see the director as well as the name of the film. So we're now going to add another column for the tags, but to do that we need to create a method. So we're going to create a method called getTags, and we'll define that method within the class here. It's going to be called getTags with self as the first parameter and then the object itself that we're looking at. This matches what's in the documentation for Django-Taggit. The object is passed in as a parameter to any function in your model admin that you're going to create within list display. So we can go back to VS Code and we're going to write that particular function. It's going to be returning a comma dot join. We're going to look at the tags, the object's tags, so object.tags.names. We're going to look at the names of those tags, and we'll just return each one of those within a list and then join that up with a comma. And the syntax error here, we need to add in here to that statement there. And when we save that and go back to the model admin, we should now see the comma delimited list of tags as well in this particular list display page. And one other thing to note is that the documentation recommends defining a getQuerySet method where you prefetch your tags, and this will cut down a lot on the database queries. We're not going to bother with that, but if you are doing this, you would definitely want to do that in a real application. So that's everything for the Django-Taggit library. We're now going to show these tags on the front end. So if we go back to our front end here, the page that by default loads, we've only got this text hi, which comes from a template we've got in the templates directory. It's this index template here, and we're going to change this and add some HTML to show our films along with the tags that they have attached to them. So I'm just going to create an unordered list within this template that's going to iterate over film objects in a query set. And for each film, it's going to list out the name of the film as well as all of the film's tags. And you can get the tags with the film.tags.all query, and then we render that tag with a small HTML element. So what we now need to do is we need to write a view function that is going to add films, all the films in the database, to our context. So let's go to the views.py file, and we're going to amend this index view that returns that particular template. So let's fetch all of the films in the database, and we're going to use film.objects.prefetch related, and we're going to prefetch the tags that are associated with that film, and then we'll just return all of those instances. And we need to import the film model from our core.models, and once we've got that, we'll add the films to our context. So we'll set a variable, or a key rather, called films, and we'll attach those films. So if we save that and go back to the page, we now see this ugly list of films that are being displayed along with the tags for that film. Okay, so that's step one of this. We're now going to get all of the tags, the distinct tags in the database, and we're going to display them at the top of the page. So to do that, we can use another query in our view here. But first of all, we need to import a tag model from Taggit. So from Taggit.models, we'll import that tag model, and this corresponds to our tag database table that stores all of the tags that we have. We can then issue on line 8 here another very simple query, tag.objects.all, and we're going to add that to our context under a key called tags. Now let's render that in our template. Back to the index.py, and above the unordered list, I'm going to paste in a paragraph tag, and this is just iterating over all of the tags and displaying that tag. So let's save this and go back to the page, and we see that we now have a list of the tags at the top. Now we need to make this a little bit more aesthetically appealing, so we're going to add some styles here, and this is going to be from TailwindCSS. Now, one thing I should have noted is that in the base.html template from the starter code from GitHub, we're already importing the Tailwind library as a script tag here from a CDN, so you don't need to bother getting that. It's already available in the project, and we can then use Tailwind styles within any template that extends the base template. So let's now add a button here for each of the tags, and we're going to get this from this website here. It's Tailwind Elements, and this contains a bunch of pre-built components in Tailwind, and what we're going to grab here is this button type style here. So I'm going to copy the middle button from this particular basic example, and we're going to paste it into this tags thing here. So if we paste that in and go back to our page, we see that we have a bunch of buttons here with the text of middle. Now we want to replace the text with the actual tag name. So let's go back to the template, and if we scroll over here, we get this text here. We're going to replace that with tag.name, and then that should render all of the tags within buttons that exist in our database. So let's now add a little bit of margin to this page because the text is too close to the edges here. So we're going to go back to the template, and in the content block we're going to create a div tag with a class that's coming from Tailwind called 𝗵_6, and this is going to create some margin within this particular content block, and we'll close that div off at the bottom. So we should now see that we have a little bit more space in our template when we refresh this page. So the final thing I want to do in this video is I want to improve the style of this list. We're going to use a card from 𝗏𝗏𝗽. So I'm going to paste a link in here, and this is the card component from 𝗏𝗏𝗽. 𝗏𝗏𝗽 also gives you some pre-built components in Tailwind, and these kind of components allow you to very rapidly develop nice looking websites. So we're going to copy some code from here. So we're going to copy the default card, and you can see the code down here. We can copy it with this here, and we're going to paste the card into this for loop here. So on line 16 we have a for loop over all of the films. Let's paste the card in here, and we will fix the indentation a little bit. And we can get rid of the UL tags because we're no longer creating a list here. It's going to be a card instead for each film in the database. So let's save that and go back to the page and see how that looks. So we refresh, we now get these generic cards from 𝗏𝗏𝗽. Now let's fill in the card with actual details for the film. So let's go back to the template, and we're going to add to the header the name of the film. So we'll get rid of the hard-coded text here, and we're going to paste in film.name. Remember, we're iterating over these films one at a time, and we can also paste the director below here as well, and that's going to be film.director, and we can save that and go back to the page, and we now get a card for each of the movies. So that's looking a little bit better, and this is actually in dark mode, so I'm going to change that just now, and we'll see how this looks in normal browser mode. And this is how it looks normally, so that's what you would normally see unless you're in dark mode. And Tailwind makes it very easy to customize websites so that they look different if a user has dark mode enabled on their browser. So the final thing I want to do in this video is add the tags to each movie, and we're going to do this just below the name of the director. So let's go back to our template here, and just before we close off the p tag, I'm going to paste in this small tag, and again we're going to iterate over the tags, and we're going to list them out with a comma after it. So if we save that, we can go back to this page and we get the tags underneath here. Now we're not going to do anything else with the styling, but you could arrange these in a grid if you wanted to. Tailwind makes it very easy to work with grids and flexbox in CSS. But for now, we're going to leave it there, and we're going to leave these cards. What we're going to do in the next video is we're going to add 𝗷𝗚𝗽𝗁 to this project, and we're going to let users click a tag and then filter down what films are shown based on that tag. So for example, if they click sci-fi, it would filter down to the sci-fi films, which are Blade Runner, Alien and The Thing. And then when the user clicks another tag, it will update Alpine State, and it will show the correct films based on the new tag. So we'll see how to do that in the next video. We'll integrate that with Django REST framework for returning JSON data. But for now, that's everything for this video. We've built a very simple tagging system, and we're using Django-Taggit to control all of that, and we're displaying these cards with Tailwind CSS. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you have, and we'll see you in the next video.